Consume cannabis in your region. This production is for adults only.
Have you seen the Slash?
Made by users for users.
Engineered for flavor.
One of the coolest features around.
A built-in loading tool.
Learn more at www.stonesmiths.ca.
What's happening? We'll tell you right now on This Week in Cannabis News.
Our weekly visit to the wonderful Okanagan Valley as we bring in David Wylie from the OZ for This Week in Cannabis News. And you see the beautiful pictures there. You can check out the website at okanaganz.com. David, my friend, how are you on this afternoon?
I'm doing pretty good. It's business on top with the collared shirt and track pants below. So you caught me on a good day where I'm wearing pants. So that's, thank goodness for that.
Exactly. I think a lot of I'm good. I'm not wearing pants. I'm wearing shorts. I wear shorts basically year round. Not outside all the time in my climate, but inside shorts and some inside casual, comfortable shoes. So I too am kind of casual on the top and very, very, very casual on the bottom. But that's life these days. Lots of people are doing that. Lots of people are still working from home. And I think, David, we were having a kind of discussion before we got going. I think a lot of people are realizing some of the benefits of working from home and might look to continue this post-pandemic.
I hope it's something that catches on. I mean, it makes so much sense on so many different levels, particularly being able to be casual below the camera line.
Yeah, no doubt. All right, let's dive into this first story. We're going to take a bit of a trip around the globe and then come back home, and we're going to start in Mexico with their, I call it on again, off again legalization, because we've, heard for a long time they're going to legalize, and then pandemic, that pushed things back, and then they decided to push things back for other reasons. But now it sounds like it's certainly got the votes, and it's a go in Mexico, as they might say.
Oh, just about. Yeah, it's as close to green lit as it comes at this point. Big step closer to legalizing recreational cannabis in Mexico. Their lower house there, the Chamber of Deputies, voted 316 to 129 in favor of a bill. So Mexico could become the world's largest cannabis market. Interestingly, from a global perspective, that means that the U.S. would be sandwiched between two legal countries, Canada and Mexico. It's been over 2 years since the Mexican Supreme Court ruled that the country's ban on recreational marijuana was unconstitutional. The New York Times says that this measure is expected to sail through the Senate before being sent to Mexico's president for final assent, and he's signaled his support for legalization. Well, it's not yet passed. The measure in its current form would allow adults to use cannabis. With a permit, they could grow a small number of cannabis plants at home, and it grants licenses for producers, both small farmers and commercial growers, to grow for the industry. So yeah, moving forward in Mexico.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting that the John Walsh, the director of drug policy for the Washington office on Latin America at USC Advocacy Group, saying, North America is heading towards legalization. You got Canada, as you said, Mexico sandwiched around it. The U.S., I think there's less than 15 states that don't have some form of legalization medically or recreationally. So this is a big step helping the kind of the global step forward and pushing the U.S. towards it. And I also found it really interesting, David, that, the one comment in the story I found interesting was that, when it comes to the cartels, marijuana is such a small part, if at all, for some of them. They're looking at, unfortunately, opiates and the cocaine industry and things like that. So the cartels in Mexico are legendary. We know that, but they're not really focused on marijuana. So this shouldn't impact it one way or the other, I don't think.
Yeah, that's what some of the critics say. The idea that this was going to have an impact on the cartels was part of the reasoning why Mexico is going down this road. One of the things that surprised me actually is that nearly 2/3 of people in Mexico oppose legalization through recent polling, and that was surprising for me. Often it's in the cases that we've seen, it gets pushed forward by people who want to see this happen, and it seems kind of that Mexico's bucking that trend.
Yeah, the one thing that people brought up is, there's been a lot of people growing marijuana in Mexico. Farmers have grown it, but they would get involved in warring conflicts and drug trafficking. Well, now this is legal. And the bill mandates that small farmers and indigenous people give priority in licensing, but stipulates that only that these vulnerable groups can be granted more than one license. So they are looking at the people that have unfortunately been, caught up in the middle of this for a long time, to allow them to maybe be able to make a profit and a living off of this.
Yeah, definitely. And it is going to be interesting to see how this shakes out internationally. I can name different cannabis companies around the world, but I can't name a single one that's out of Mexico. So I'm sure that we'll see that change over the next year.
Yeah, that's a really, really good point, actually, is that it could be the biggest market with a lot of people really getting involved in legalization. And obviously, the tourism industry is going to benefit from this, because there are people like myself that when I do get to travel again, I'm going to be traveling to cannabis-friendly states in the U.S. or provinces, obviously in Canada. We're all legalized here, but different countries. I'm going to be, over the next little while, choosing my travel plans based on cannabis, because it's an important part of my life. So we'll see how that impacts the tourism industry in Mexico. Okay, let's get on to another global story, and this one involving Curaleaf as they dive into the global cannabis market.
Curaleaf is the biggest cannabis company in the U.S. as far as footprint goes. Companies are jockeying right now for position in developing international markets, and Curaleaf Holdings, it's actually the biggest cannabis company in the world, even, has made a huge move in the European cannabis market. The company's agreed to buy EMAC Life Sciences for about $285 million, and that gives Curaleaf an entrance into Europe's growing cannabis market out there. EMAC is the largest cannabis company in Europe, again, by footprint. And in an interview with Bloomberg, EMAC CEO Antonio Costanzo called the deal a game-changing combination with the two companies coming together. A lot of different companies now are eyeing the massive European market with that potential shift right now of their medical industry into a recreational one. Now, this particular deal's currency is Curaleaf shares and cash. So we're going to be seeing some developments in Europe. The Netherlands and Switzerland are expected to implement recreational programs by the end of the year. So lots of change there on the horizon. And, U.S. companies have mostly been focused on North America, but are definitely switching their focus now to compete with other Canadian companies overseas.
Yeah, and that's so interesting, is that, we've talked a lot about Canadian companies that have, invested in U.S. companies and purchased and, mergers and acquisitions and things like that. And that we've been so focused a lot of the things on the U.S. because they are such a trendsetter. But again, we talked about Mexico, Canada sandwiching the U.S. That puts pressure on them. A global cannabis market really puts pressure. Companies going in the legalization route in Europe really forces, the U.S. to look a lot harder at federally legalizing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't think that there's much question that that's on the agenda. But the more pressure for a speedier entry for legalization across the U.S., could have an impact. Yeah, it's the global market is changing so much, and you can see that if you're looking at news releases for earnings reports for different Canadian companies. A lot of them, medium-sized, large ones, do have a focus on some global growth, and we're also going to be seeing more and more companies buying up the big players, buying the small players for those different tickets to different countries.
Mm-hmm. And expanding into the Middle East and Africa. They're talking about countries like Poland, Ukraine, South Africa. There's rumors of Egypt, according to this article. So certainly, the push is on. Now we say lots of countries could be looking at things, and it never does happen. And whether they do it to curry favor with somebody in the political side, and never happens, who knows? But the fact that people are talking about this means that wheel of cannabis is continuing to turn globally, and that that's the best thing ever. So, and you know what, we should be proud as a country that we are playing a role in this. As other than Uruguay, we were the first G7 country to legalize fully. So that's something that we should be proud of, because other countries are going to be looking at our blueprint. But our blueprint isn't particularly perfect either, David, and a lot of countries are going to make changes. And one of the things about our legalization situation and the process is the taxes. We all knew that the government was going to tax and get their piece of the pie, because that was never going to be a question. But now people are saying, do they really have to be that high? I mean, do they like here in Alberta, we have massive excise taxes. So there is some pushback now against the tax system in the cannabis industry.
Some really interesting points brought up by stratcan.com. Their question is Canada's method for taxing cannabis flower broken? Got a hold of Tantalus Labs CEO Dan Sutton, who thinks so. Basically, here's how it works in Canada. Cannabis is taxed at 10% of the dried flower selling price, or $1 per gram, so whichever is higher. About 25% of this revenue goes to the federal government, 75% goes to a provincial or territorial government. Now, Sutton says that if cannabis were selling at over $10 a gram, then the percentage formula would kick in. But right now, paying $1 in tax on, say, a $3.50 or a $4 wholesale gram is quite a big piece of that pie. Now, the intention of this was to prevent a phenomenon where Canada hits $1 a gram. And that happened in Oregon. And the fear that it would encourage consumption by young people, because there would be such a large amount of excess cannabis on the market. Now, the tax structure doesn't just impact companies, it impacts us as cannabis enthusiasts, because we're paying essentially tax on tax, and less of our money goes toward buying the actual consumer good. And as flower's marked up, it's taxed again, right, through its journey. So tax and tax and tax along the way. Sutton says the system overall benefits big producers who can actually take the hit on their end, but it's small growers that suffer. So it's a really interesting conundrum. And I know that there's the review process that's underway right now on cannabis legislation, different aspects of it. I'm sure that this is something that's going to get looked at.
Yeah, indeed. And, they also discuss in this piece about the medical patient isn't exempt from these taxes as well. And a specific amount of excise tax is invisible to the patient, is the quote from Kelly Seagram, the new business manager at Shelter Cannabis. And I think that's concerning as well.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, the medical system is broken, and we've talked about that. And now you're just adding a further cost onto a system that just doesn't work well for the patient.
Yeah, you're right. So much focus, and rightfully so, has gone towards legalization of recreational cannabis, and I'm very, very glad for that. But we do need to look at what the medical cannabis system has become, and realize that this is medicine for patients, and that should be a priority. We're still working towards fixing the recreational side, but we've kind of forgotten about, the medical side. We had to do so much dusting, we forgot about the vacuuming or whatever, right? Like there's got to be we've got to have a balance, because the medical side they were the kind of impetus and the real push, a big push, I should say, towards getting legalization going and things like that. So we can't forget about the medical side, and we can't forget, David, about the people that are in jail, that are behind bars because of pot, and the process has been a slow one so far.
Fewer than 400 people have been pardoned for prohibition-era cannabis crimes, which seems remarkably low. That's been since about 20 months now that the federal government's unveiled its pot pardon program for possession. Say that 3 times fast. Now, the Parole Board of Canada tells CTV that as of March 1st, officials have granted 395 pardons. Another 251 have actually been rejected due to ineligibility or incompleteness. Having a criminal record can impact travel, volunteer and employment opportunities, and there's also potential for family law impacts. So this isn't just a small deal of having had a gram on you in the past. This can impact your moves moving forward. Now, lawyer Paul Lewin says that part of the reason for the small numbers is that the program just doesn't apply to as many Canadians as was originally thought. And he said that the initial number of 250,000 of these records was cited, which is likely too high, he says. Most possession convictions are from the 90s or before, so there haven't been too many recent prosecutions. Personally, I was really surprised to find out that in 2017, 2018, before these free pardons, that 935 people were pardoned for breaking the Controlled Drugs and Substances Act. That's the act that cannabis possession offenses fell under since the mid-90s. And another over 1,000 people, 1,040 people were pardoned for breaking the even earlier Narcotic Control Act. So we're actually seeing fewer people who are accessing this program, even though some of the barriers have been removed.
Yeah, and some of those reasons are because the process is, sometimes there's definitely a fee. I think it's like, starts at $600 and some that you have to get the process. You have to go find these documents. Sometimes they're in other cities, and it's not an easy process for people, especially during these times with COVID. So maybe there's, maybe a reason for a bit of a slowdown. I'm not sure, but the process isn't terribly easy. And also, you mentioned it. Some of these things are from the 80s and 90s. And some of those people are not around anymore, unfortunately. And that's a reason why, those, records haven't been expunged or whatever the term might be. So there's a number of reasons, but the entire process from, what the lawyers in this article are talking about is very, very, very detailed and a tough process to do for some people.
Yeah, it's still prohibitive. Even you have to go through a fingerprinting process. Mm-hmm. There were arguments at the beginning that continue to this day that pardons are not the way to go, but rather expungement is the way to do it. So basically, you wouldn't have to go through any process or application to do it. Your record would just be removed. So I still think that that's the way to go. The federal government says that it's just too difficult. So that's the challenge. You going through all the different documents and double checking to see that you've got the right offenses. And like you mentioned, accessing those original court documents, because it's just not clear whether it's cannabis possession or cocaine possession or MDMA possession. They don't know. It wasn't spelled out in these just in the overall act and charge.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's as we said at different times with certain things in the legalization process, the government of Canada did the bare minimum, if that. So it's it's legal, but it's incredibly hard to succeed when there are so many regulations of what you can do and can't do. But it is a process. It is still unfolding, and hopefully the process will get easier and faster
crossed.
for some people for sure. So, David, as usual, another excellent episode of This Week in Cannabis News, and people can find an ounce of info at okanaganz.com, and I'm sure you guys are getting closer to this picture that's on the screen right now, weather-wise out there.
Oh, I hope so. It takes a little bit of time for everything to green up, but the sunshine is out.
Awesome. Thanks so much, David. We'll chat next week.
Good to talk to you, Dean.
Check us out and follow us on social media at the Cannabis 101 on Twitter, at the Cannabis 101 Podcast on Instagram, and at the Canna 101 Podcast on Facebook. You can email us at cannabis101podcast@gmail.com.